Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am Courtney Anderson, and this is episode 226. We are 226 episodes into this show. Awesome. And episode 226, today we have a show that is part of the Financial Fierceness series. Financial Fierceness series, of course, we're talking about finance. We're talking about being fierce. And the whole idea is we are always focusing on surpassing our goals. And with our financial goals, we often are addressing the concept of our financial independence. When we're financially independent, we have enough income from our diversified sources so that we are not dependent on any one revenue stream. In other words, if we lose a job, a contract, a family member loses a job or full-time employment, it's frustrating. It's difficult, but it's not financially going to substantially impact our standard of and our quality of life because we have other resources. Many of them are going to be income generating, and we will be independent of, again, these individual revenue streams creating financial catastrophe or destruction. So the show today is one that is one that in preparing the show notes and getting ready for the show, it's a sobering topic. That's what it is. It's sobering. Like many of the programs that we do, I'm working through and I'm looking at the content and working on potentially a show outline and a schedule, and I'll sometimes be struck by just the research and the concepts that I'm considering for the program. And this is one of those topics. So what's the topic today that's so sobering? The one that to a certain degree struck me individually as I was preparing for our program. Well, here today in episode 226 of our Solutions with Courtney Anderson show, in our Financial Fierceness series, our specific show topic is, what if I have no money saved for retirement? What if I have no money saved for retirement? That's our show. That's our show. And as I said, it's a sobering topic because when we start looking through this, and I'm based in the US right now, and so as I was putting together the show notes, I'm looking up data in the US, and it's sobering. As I always mention in our programs, please come to CourtneyAnderson.com, bookmark our site, and that's our central library, our repository of content. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages on that website, in the 600 to 700 page range as of the time of this show taping, and new content's being added every day. So when you come to CourtneyAnderson.com and you come to the show page site for episode 226, you'll see some links to data. And what I have been using on several of our recent shows is this structure of sort of the 14 highlights of each show episode. And I call those 14 different items, collectively, I call them a stone of solutions. And that's because a stone is a unit of measurement and roughly correlates to about 14 pounds in the U.S. System. So one stone is made up of 14 units, so we have 14 items for the show, and I call that a stone of solutions. So one of the stone of solutions that you'll see, this is from the U.S. On average, women have $34,881 US dollars saved for retirement. 60% of workers in the U.S. have less than $25,000 saved for retirement, and that is total. 36% of workers have less than $1,000 in savings and retirement, and savings and investments that could be used for retirement. Okay, so even if we are not math experts, right? If math is not one of our strong suits in life, and we think to ourselves, oh, it's a little, I'm not, calculus is difficult, trigonometry sometimes, but even just the most fundamental math fluent individuals understand $1,000 total for retirement? And retirement is the idea that I live to a certain point, and then at a certain point, even though I'm healthy and I'm here I am, I'm still me, but at a certain point I had this concept. There's a very modern concept, of course, as our lives have gotten longer. The concept built into many things that have happened in our shared human history, right? Industrial revolution, all kinds of exciting changes. That the idea is I live long enough, and at some point I sort of move into a slower pace of life, and so I'm not out doing the same thing I was at 85 that I was doing at 25. Right, because I'm 85 and now I'm in this idea of retirement, right? So I'm at a slower pace. I'm not working the same pace. I'm not working the same amount of hours. I'm retired, and sort of stereotypically in our minds when we think about this, what do you do when you're retired? Well, when I'm 85, I'll be doing different things, right? So I'm not working like I was at 25. Maybe I spend time with my friends and family. Maybe I spend time doing the hobbies I enjoy. I do gardening or square dancing or archery or whatever, rock climbing. I mean, whatever it is, right? I'm retired. I'm sort of enjoying that. It's sort of in the media representations, they have a lot of marketing pieces all around the world, but certainly in North America, and they'll have commercials usually marketing something toward this population, and the retirees, they're having so much fun, right? They're traveling, they're just living this great life because they're not doing the sort of same mandatory stuff you have to do when you're 25 because they're 85, they're 95, they're 105. Okay. As I said, we don't have to be the most skilled mathematician to understand that $1,000 US total is not going to give you that lifestyle that we see in and not just in marketing pieces, but you'll see it in art. You'll see it in film. You'll see it in television shows. The retiree person, look at the fun they're having, how great their life is. It's going to be very difficult on $1,000 total, especially when many of us are living longer and longer lives, right? So like I said, the whole concept of retirement this is all really modern for us humans because, our lifespan, when we live to 25 years on average or 30, we weren't really talking about retirement. You're born, you live, and you die before, by the time you're 30, right? Or younger. So you're not worried about retirement because your lifespan was so short. But all these wonderful things we do, like I said, our societies, our discoveries, and science and medicine. Look at the things we can treat and cure, right? So look at this. So it's not that our average lifespan, isn't what it was in the past. And many societies are average, not even our superstars, but our average, it was in the 70s and the 80s. I saw a fascinating program a few months ago, and I'll put the link to this in the show notes. I'm sure I can find it. It was a piece from the 60 Minutes, which is a news magazine. It's been on. There are different versions of it around the world, but the one in the States has been on for, I would say, my entire lifetime. And often they have really interesting pieces. So it was focusing on a group of people who lived, and they were over 100 years old, right? And so it was the science of looking at these populations of people who are in their hundreds and, the quality of life. And I loved the show because, of course, they picked these wonderful aspirational examples. Men and women who were in their hundreds, they were driving, they were dancing, they were dating, they were working. Some worked volunteer work, some worked paid work. They were lively, they were funny, they were, entertaining, they were, going out with their friends, they were spending time with their loved ones. I mean, I was watching that and I thought, this is going to be great. Wait till I'm 109 like that lady. What fun she's having. And really, it was really inspirational, right? Because, of course, age, absent being infirm and having maladies, physical, mental, things of that nature, if it's you, just doing what you normally do, well, then, yeah, that would be great, right? And you have all this wealth of knowledge. And you look back, you're 109, you think back in your mind, wow, what happened, 50 years ago or 60 years ago or 80 years ago. It's just awesome, right? And I had also seen a piece. I was reading and I was listening to music, and then I started thinking about some of the entertainers who still perform, and Tony Bennett, who is a very talented jazz artist, but also does sort of standard American standards and is known for the American songbook. Anyway, I think he's about 88 years old, and he's still performing as the time of this taping. And I saw some other documentary about a comedian. She was working in her 80s. Joan Rivers, who at the time of taping has passed away, but I mean she was in her 80s. She was working, working, working. I mean, it's just So my point is, being in your 80s or being in your 100s, if your life is still awesome, sounds great. One of the challenges, though, of being in your 80s and 100s, and let's move it back down to let's go back down to our 50s and 60s. It's not super awesome if we're looking at this concept of retirement and we have no money. The sobering topic we have is, what if I have no money saved for retirement? And the reality is, let's get to some of the statistics I've shared with you are explaining you're not alone. In the US, 36% of workers have less than $1,000 saved. A large number of workers have zero. I have some other statistics that are on the show page, and I've got links to where I got the numbers. As always, I endeavor to do that. And if you see something and you think, maybe if I'm missing a link or something, then just let me know, right? Send me a message, because we always are making sure that we're doing our best to try to ensure that we're using credible sources, and that we're also aware that we may encounter data that's not credible. It turns out that it isn't, but some of it's from different research entities, and then some of it's from government data. Here, this piece of data from the U.S. government, from the Department of Labor, says of the 62 million, ooh, that's a big number, it's all relative, of the 62 million wage and salaried women ages 21 to 64 working in the United States, just 45% participated in a retirement plan. All right, so big picture. You're not alone if you don't have any money saved for retirement. So the positive of that is it's not just you, right? That always makes us feel better. I know I always feel better when something's going on in my life and I'm feeling maybe like anxiety, or I feel like, oh, I'm messing up, or I feel like, oh my goodness, I'm not doing maybe what I could do or what I should do. What's everybody else doing? I try not to do this, but at times we all go through these thoughts, right? And then you find out when you do a little bit of research, hey, it's not just me. So it's not like I'm just a weird aberration, like I'm just some oddball. No, all kinds of other people have similar situations. So that's a positive in a way. One of the reasons in our entire financial fierceness series that I keep coming back to the concept, and I talk about in all the different show topics, I talk about diversification, right? I talk about working to attain, and then we're going to sustain our financial independence. We talk about different types of assets that we're going to have, some of which need to be income producing assets, meaning something you own that gives you money, like a rental home or some sort of entity that you own this thing, and just by owning it, just by virtue of owning it, then you can put it into a relationship where that thing that you own gives you money. Money itself can earn interest. So if you own money, literally, interest on it is by taking that money and entering into a relationship where someone's going to give you interest just for having it. Right? So what we're looking at is trying everything that we can think of assertively to get to a point where we're not going to be in a situation where we're looking at retirement and we don't have any money. Our entire focus of our program, the entire series of financial fierceness, is you have different resources along your life's path, whether you're 20 or you're 115. The reality is that obviously not everybody is listening to our program yet, right? Come on, let's be positive. Although I have to say, it's amazing how many people are. I'm constantly gobsmacked, shall we say, and grateful. Okay, here's the deal. If you don't have any money saved for retirement, so we just took a few moments to say, oh, thank goodness, it's not just you. You're not the only one. Whew. Okay, so that makes us feel better. Now let's stop feeling better and move on to getting focused on what we need to do to fix this. Because not having any money for retirement is awful. I would also argue, but not having any money before retirement is awful. Okay. Big picture, in many parts of the world, there are going to be collective societal programs where the collective society says, we don't have to do this, right? But we choose to, as a group, make decisions for people who either are elderly, are disabled, of any age, right? So we're not going to let our people, whatever our collective group is, we're not going to let our people be, starving and be without. And maybe the person is, 88 years old and working and having a great life, and they're at the gym and they're just out and about and they're, dancing and everything's wonderful. Awesome. Maybe the person's 88 years old, and we know just sort of the numbers, as we grow older, we're more susceptible, not individually, but collectively, to I hate the term, but what we tend to think of as people who aren't scientists or necessarily experts, kind of quote old age. That's the term I hate, right? Old age, and a lot of times we don't think of that vibrant, fun, out and about, having a wonderful quality of life person who's elderly. Again, another word that's all relative. But we think of somebody who's not vibrant, whose body may not even permit them, the mobility. And we collectively in societies around the world have different details to the system, but in general, we come up with ideas where we're all going to, in general, pitch in and share resources. And so by doing that, they're usually through formal apparatus, like a government will do this, so that if somebody meets the criteria to be in that group, then that collective society has decided for people who are, unable, right? They're disabled, or they maybe they're still able, but we just decided at a certain point we're going to help, right? And again, it's usually older, so somewhere in their 60s, and the idea in the U.S. used to be 65 years old. The numbers are now moving up because what keeps happening, of course, just as humans, we're living longer. We keep having all these new, great, wonderful discoveries and inventions and, medical advancements and all this kind of great stuff. But every time we do that, what it does is we just are creating, in many ways, a bigger challenge. Right? It was much easier when people on average lived in their 20s, or, and if you were old, if you lived to your 30s, because you had less people. And the ones that were alive, were healthier, because the ones that weren't, didn't survive. Now we have all these advancements, and in our modern society, we can keep someone, quote, alive, maybe not the best quality of life, but we have so many different advancements, and we keep learning new stuff. So we have more and more people that live longer and longer and longer. And some of them live longer and also have more disabilities and things of that nature. And so when governments decide we're going to pitch in, we're going to share, and then we're just going to decide we're not going to let anyone in our group suffer, right? Starvation or things of that nature, just because they're unable to earn their own wages or support themselves. Then you have benefits through collective systems like that. And so you'll have those, the details are different depending on what system you're in. But in general, at a certain point, if you qualify for the programs, then the society collectively helps you. Now, in most parts of the world, even where you don't have formal programs, you'll have informal programs. And people have them through their religious groups, they'll have them through their worship communities, they'll have them through different social groups where that group will do the same thing, right? People will pitch in and share, and then they'll make sure that people in their group who are unable or just maybe they're still able, but they think, hey, do we really need our 91-year-old member of our religious group to be working full time? He's 91 years old, right? He deserves maybe a little bit of a break. And so people through that same apparatus, right, then they'll go and they'll share, hey, here's some resources, right? Here's either money or here's food or clothes, or we'll pay your utilities or whatever. So they're formal systems, and they're through often, like I said, governments, and then they're informal systems through all different types of collective groups. But the idea is that we're not going to, first of all, that could be and may be us, and we understand that, right? And the other thing is, in many ethical, philosophical, and religious schools of thought, it's just, quote, the right thing to do. So in many parts of the world, even if you save nothing, you're not going to necessarily, quote, starve, because the collective groups have decided ahead of time that this is not how we live as humans. It's not what we're going to do. It's not who we are. So when you look on the show page for this episode, you'll see I have some statistics here. So in the U.S., there are formal and informal, as in many parts of the world. So in the U.S., one of the formal systems, the government, the federal government. So the federal government has a system, and we just call this the Social Security system, right? And in the Social Security system, when you meet all their qualifications, and then at a certain point, they take the shared resources and help people who are either unable or who are still able, but at a certain age. We just, again, do we want somebody who's, whatever age to still have to do the same thing at 75 that they did at 35, and most of our societies are saying no. So in the U.S., here's some statistics. The median Social Security benefit in the U.S. 2012, the numbers for men. So for an individual man, he made $16,295. $16,295. That's for the whole year. For a woman made $11,999. And so if you were in that group and you received that money, and even though you don't have anything saved for retirement on your own, but let's say you have your place you live and it's paid off, right? So maybe if there was a loan in the past, or there was never a loan, doesn't really matter, but you don't owe anything, right? There's not a monthly payment you make. So you don't pay rent and you own it. So the only thing you'd have to pay then would be any property taxes that are on the property, and the utilities. In many systems, in many parts of the world, again, communities decide they're going to share, and they'll often do this where they'll have programs through the utilities, because in many parts of the world, the utilities, some of them, in some places all of them, but even where I live in the U.S., some of our utilities are through the government, they're through our city, and some of them are through private sector. So like the water is through my city. I literally pay the city for my water, and my sewer, and then I pay some private companies for some of my other utilities, like my gas or whatever. And in many of these systems, especially the government ones, again, you'll get to a certain age, and then they'll have a program where you pay either less or maybe even some instances nothing, right? Because if you're making $11,000 a year coming in, and you don't have to pay for your housing, and you're on a lower payment for these basic utilities, you'll be okay. You could make it, because you don't have any bills, right? So you're not going out to eat at the fanciest restaurant, but you have some money coming in, and if you don't have any bills, it's like, this is the key. You don't have any bills. That's why I said wherever you're living, you don't have any payments on anything. You're not paying for a car note. You're not paying for your, for the mortgage. You're not paying for rent. The numbers would work. I mean, we did a show in our Financial Fierceness series about, making it on $1,800 a month and doing okay. Yeah. And the basic premise of all that program, and if you haven't listened to it, please do. The premise of that show was, if you don't have any bills, it's going to keep coming back to that. Do you not have any bills? Now, if you have bills, then the system fails. If you could make $11,999 a year and be, in deep financial trouble and broke. But you could make $11,999 a month or a week and be broke. Yeah, I just said that. And I've known and worked with people who have had that situation. How are you broke on $11,000 a week? Because you're spending $12,000 a week. It doesn't matter how much it is. It just matters what your outlay is. Right? So the retirement with nothing saved, yay, you're not the only one. Um, the second part of what I'm saying with all this sort of exposition is in many parts of the world, there are going to be formal and informal systems that are going to kick in so that hopefully you'll have some sort of what they call a safety net, right? And I was just reading you some numbers for what the system in the States, right? So if you have nothing saved and you live in a part of the world where there's a formal system, especially a formal system, informal's awesome too. The only challenge with informal sometimes is because it's informal, it could be more susceptible to just sort of change, right? Because it's not mandated. It's just what people are doing in the group. But who knows? The group could change, or something could happen, or who knows? That could happen with the formal system too, and that's what people panic about all the time around the world, right? Well, what'll happen to the benefits when governments go through radical changes? And that's why people ideally should be civically engaged, pay attention, and do everything in their power, individually and collectively, to ensure that it's some version of we the people, right? Like we are the government, and we are going to do everything to ensure that we follow through on our promises and commitments, right? That's what we're working on as humans. But we also know that since we're humans, then everything is potentially possible to some huge changes happen, right? Who knows? Humans may have to evacuate Earth and go to some other, colony in some other, planet. If that happens, I'm not really sure how it'll work out with, what, our old countries we used to have and then our new ones. That may sound silly, but look through human history and, change happens. So, hey, in that framework though, let's be very real. First of all, we don't know how long we're going to live. The really great part of this is we may not even make it to retirement. I'll never forget when I was in my 20s and I had opened my law firm, and I was doing pretty well financially. And so I went to a bank and I was talking to the banker about, I don't remember what specifically. And so the banker started talking to me about retirement, right? And was like, oh, blah, 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 this retirement, that retirement. And I said to her, I don't know, I said to her, hey, I'm 27 years old. Like, what? I mean, you're talking about, you put money in a lot of the vehicles, and there's specific rules that are set up, and the rules that are set up for a lot of the things that you are planning for investment. When they set up the rule, whoever they are, some government and or other entity, when they set up the rule, they're trying to force people to stick to the plan, right? So if I'm putting money in this entity, and this is supposed to be savings for retirement, if I can put the money in there on Monday and pull the money out on Tuesday, then it's going to ruin my whole plan when I'm supposed to be saving for something that's, when I'm 27, I'm supposed to be getting ready for being 67, right? When I can get the money out. And so a lot of these investment vehicles, you see why. Like, they'll set them up and then they'll have penalties to try to stop people from pulling the money out. Because if you put the money in at 27 and then you leave it until you're 67 and it's invested in whatever comfortable manner you have, or you have some allocation of risk, right? So some of it is invested in debt, maybe in bonds, and some of it's invested in stocks, and some of it's invested in other vehicles, maybe government bonds, right? So you have a diversity of different types of risk, but the idea is that you leave the money in there from 27 to 67, and then by the time you're 67, they take all of the requirements and restrictions off, and you pull the money out without the penalty. And now look at all the money you saved, right? Like, you have 4 decades of saving, and some of the money that you allocated toward higher risk, ideally, hopefully, would have given you even a greater increase in your return on your investment. And so that's the idea. And so when you put your money in these types of vehicles, then there's a whole bunch of restrictions on how you can access the money. And so I was having a discussion with the banker or whatever, whenever I was in my 20s, and I was saying to the banker, like, I'm not even thinking about 40 years from now, like, at all. I'm thinking about today. I'm thinking about my bills for my business this month. I'm thinking about, my immediate interests and goals or whatever, but I'm not thinking about that. And you to tell me about, I understand. I mean, I understand all of my options, but one of the things that's a turnoff for me at 27 is I put my money in these vehicles. I can't get it out until, I live to be that long, which presupposes I will live that long. And I've shared in some of our, discussions, my own journey in life. I wasn't necessarily the most optimistic person at 27 that I thought, 67 is like a shoe-in. I'm still not necessarily, sitting around thinking like, absolutely. I'm a little bit more optimistic than I used to be. But I also understood, my other argument was I'm going to go and I'll invest all this money and then it'll grow and it'll grow and it'll grow. And like, let's say I do live that long. You will, okay. And then I'll have too much money. And this is a discussion I've mentioned in other programs, and it's still something it's another show, but many people go and they work and they work and they work and they work and they work, and they're doing all this because they're building something for somebody else, for their grandchild, for their niece, for their adopted daughter, for their whatever. I've never been in that situation. So for me, it's sort of like I think I build all these resources, and then if I don't get to enjoy them and use them, then I have things set up to go to different charitable entities and things I care about. But I sort of feel like, I mean, I'm not creating wealth to hand it off to some, like my great 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 grandchild. So I feel like I should enjoy whatever lifestyle I have and have my own sense of financial security, but I don't necessarily want to hoard a whole bunch of money for what purpose? Once you get through all the stuff that you need and the stuff that you want, and then you get to the extra. At a certain point, I mean, it's nice, but and I'm glad I can be charitable, but I don't necessarily see that as that's not a motivation for me. And it's one of the things we talked about in our satisfaction saturation series, but our self-employment ecstasy series about being a lifestyle entrepreneur, right? That's basically, even though I didn't realize it at the time, but that's basically how I look at life. Like I like a life, like I want to have my goals and my dreams and my travel and my adventure and my financial independence, but I'm not trying to, but that's it. Like I'm not trying to build some big, huge thing where I bequeath to my, great great grandchild, trillions of dollars. That's not really it. So it was very difficult for me in the past to wrap my head around, like I'm going to put this money in this vehicle and I'm going to have penalties to pull it out until I hit, some number, 40 years in the future. Now, I'm not 27 anymore, right? But I'm still several decades away from being able to pull money out of these investment for retirement vehicles without penalties. So I'm better and I'm more optimistic, hopefully, that I'll live longer. But all that's to say is this. Okay, freaking out about, oh my goodness, I don't have any money saved for retirement. First, we talked about, hey, you're not alone. We gave some data points. If you're in a different part of the world than the stats I use in the States, then go pull some data from your part of the world. I guarantee you're not alone. So that'll help you, right? So it's not just you. The second thing is, I don't know how long I'm going to live. And that's important. Now, the reality, though, is that many of us, our life changes. Right? So I just go through this whole thing. Oh, I'm not really right now building anything for some great great grandchild, but maybe in the future I would be, right? And a lot of people do have children, siblings, people, adopted children, people in their community, and people have institutions they care about. Their temple, their church, their alma mater. I mean, so there's all kind of things that people are very interested in or care passionately about. Right. So that may happen, hopefully, for me, that I'll get more things that I'm more invested in, and want to work harder to earn more to be able to either give to charity now while I'm alive or as part of my estate when I pass. If you don't have any money saved for retirement, the odds are that the reason isn't because you just didn't care. It certainly is possible, and I'm sure it happens somewhat, where somebody does have a ton of money coming in, right? They earn a huge amount of money at their business or their employment, and they just literally spend all of it on cotton candy and karaoke or something, and that does happen, but it's rare. And part of the very sort of weird thing about societies. And again, this is different in the specifics and the details, but in general, around the world, the more money you make, then the more benefits and the more structure is provided for you, which seems sort of inverse from maybe what you would think. In other words, when you go and you get a job at a big fancy multinational, and you're getting a big fancy job, and you're getting a 6-figure job, right, or a 7-figure job, um, there's usually a really nice benefit packet that comes with that. And so the higher income individual, even as an employee, often will get very generous benefits for retirement, for pensions, for all types of opportunities. Oddly, the person who makes very little money or the lowest legal wage possible, which in many parts of the world we call the minimum wage, right? Literally, that's the lowest amount of money you could pay somebody without violating law. Those people usually aren't getting anywhere near the type of awesome benefit packages that people are at the higher systems. It's the reason I say it's odd is because you would think the person who really needs, who would really benefit from and need, you know, a company matching retirement or some sort of extra awesome benefit would be the person who makes less money. Like they would need it. Where the person who already makes a lot of money to begin with, they don't need it. But that just sort of tends to be how we humans have set these things up, right? Those who don't need it get it. Those who need it don't really get it. So the people who usually haven't saved any money for retirement haven't saved any money for retirement because they haven't had any. Not because they didn't want to. I said that happens, right? But that's not the majority. The majority of people haven't saved anything because they didn't have anything to save, because they had just enough money barely to come that they earned. Especially for wages, because when you're looking at wages, you can't control them. The only thing you can control with wages is at the beginning you can do everything in your power to negotiate the best wage possible. And we did a program on that, right, about how when you're negotiating salary, don't mention the number first. So listen to that if you haven't, that show. But other than you going in there and fighting for the best wage you can on the front end before you start the relationship, then you're totally at the mercy of whatever system you're in. So some systems you might be individually able or collectively able to bargain in unions, and then there might be a wage increase or pay raise based on longevity or whatever that the system will get, will dole out. But you're not going to be able to deviate drastically from whatever the system's already set up beyond what you can do on the front end to come in at the highest wage that you need, that you would like. Because once you're in there, whether you're in a collective or individual bargaining situation, you're still going to not be able to do some dramatic change. You're not going to be able to go from, hey, I made, $20,000 last year, and this year I made $200,000, unless you're on a system where you have another type of income that's based on your performance individually, like bonuses or commissions. Then it's possible, but those types of jobs, again, are really rare. And you have to have a skill set where you're going to be able to earn bonus or commission. And usually in those jobs, you can get these huge upsides, but you're also at the mercy of, if you don't perform, then you're out the door, because they're going to say, hey, the reason why we have a structure where you can have these massive bonus and commission opportunities, because we expect you to perform. And if you don't perform, you got to go, because I need somebody else that can produce, right? So the average person who doesn't love that type of environment and doesn't have that skill set for sales or those types of which are really important, but they're rare skills. The average in person, once you're in there and that's your salary, then you're going to get whatever the system's decided, right? So if it's a cost of living increase, or your union has set up for the next, longevity increase or whatever, that's or just your boss, if you individually are bargaining, if your boss is like, hey, we're doing 2% raises this year, okay, or they say, hey, we're not doing any raises, you really can't do much to earn more. The only way you can earn more money in a wage system and set like that is to go outside that system and pick up additional extra jobs. The thing you bump up against then, though, is there's only 24 hours in our days, and you have to sleep and you have to eat and you have to have hygiene time. And even people who work 2 and 3 jobs. I remember when I was working my way through undergraduate school, I'd gotten a job at a factory, and it was a technology factory, but it was a 24-hour factory, and I worked like a 12-hour shift. I would go in 4 days one week and work 12 hours. The next week I'd go in 3 days and work 12 hours. So it averaged out to, the 40-hour week on average. But there were people who would work that full job. Like, that's a full-time job, right? But they would also have another full-time job that they'd work on their off days. So they'd be working another, full-time job. And I knew some people who would do 12 hours on that job and then sleep like an hour or two and then go do like another like 6 to 8 hour job. The problem, of course, again, you run up just against the machinery of our human body. Like you can only go so far without sleeping. People do all kind of stuff. I knew people who, you know, and I talked to a lady a little while ago who did this. She'd been a security guard, and then she'd work another full-time job, and then because it took too long to commute back to her like apartment, and change clothes and all that kind of stuff, she would literally go and have all her clothes for her two different jobs, and when she left one job, she would go drive in her car and just like sleep in her car in the parking lot for a little bit, change clothes, whatever, in the bathroom, and then go to her second job because she didn't even have time to like go back. Sleeping in your car, of course, dangerous. And there was an awfully sad story about somebody in the U.S. who was doing this, sleeping in the car, and had some chemical because she had the car on, I think, for heat, and some of the dangerous chemicals got into her breathing space, and she passed away. Right? We don't. Oh, geez. So what I'm trying to say is this: how do you make more money? Is the question. Right? Because I'm coming from the argument that the reason you haven't saved anything for retirement isn't just because you wasted it all on karaoke and cotton candy, but it's because you literally don't have any money. If you don't have any money, how do you get more money? Well, people do more of this thing where they try to pick up more hours than they do, to me, the thing that's easier, which is you need to make more money per hour. And as I said, when I worked entry-level jobs, minimum wage jobs, jobs where you didn't necessarily need a high school degree or diploma, what people tend to do is think, I can get more hours, right? They'll just get another job. That's what they're doing. And all the stories I just shared where people I've known and read about and worked with in the past who did this, right? They're just like, hey, I'll stay for an hour or two and I'll go work another job. Because in their mind, it's like, okay, I can just get more hours. But what I'm arguing is that you're hitting up against the reality that you can't really, even when you have two 8-hour jobs, right? And I knew people who did this, and they'd say, well, yeah, but there's plenty of time left. That leaves another 8 hours to sleep and rest and everything. Technically, yeah, but you got to commute, and most of the people I knew that did this had families, right? So you got to take care of your kids, you got to help out with your parents. You got a lot on your plate, and your body will give out on you, and it does. The easiest thing to do, though, like I said, is you need to we all face this thing with the time. Like, we all are up against that. So the easiest thing to do is to go make more money per hour instead of running around trying to get more hours with these low wages, because you're going to max out. You're never going to be able to do anything more than what you're doing. How do you get more money per hour? Well, option one, I mentioned a few minutes ago, you have some extraordinarily, fantastically awesome sales skills. If you are able, I was going to say if you're trained, and part of it's training, but a lot of it is the skills have to, somewhat they're innate. I can take somebody who's already got the innate skills and make them a better salesperson, but I can't take someone, I haven't been able to figure this out, who has just no talent or inclination or motivation for sales and transform them into some super awesome salesperson, because it's a certain type of skill combination you need. So salespeople are, if you're disciplined, self-disciplined, and then you have all the other great skills, right? Your communication skills, your eye contact, the way you use your voice. You understand human behavior, sales. You can usually, if you're good at sales, and motivated, right? You can make a good living almost anywhere in the world doing really almost anything. And that's because sales are such a rare skill, and everybody needs that. Everybody needs whether they call it business development or sales or whatever they want to call it, doesn't really matter, but everybody needs business. So if you're good in sales, you can figure that out early enough, and you find something you really enjoy, and it helps if you're selling something that you really care about. So ideally, if you're great at sales and you love real estate, then you're in the real estate industry and sales, and that's going to help you. But if you're great at sales, most people who are really great at sales, they don't even have to really love whatever it is they're selling. They're just that good at sales. And so that's one path. Because what happens there is you're paid based on the deal. and you're not paid based on how many hours you put into it, because when every time you're locked into hours, you're limited. When you're based on the deal, it just means you want to go get a bigger deal, right? So if I know I'm going to get 3% of this deal, then my goal is going to be to maximize how big the deal is, because 3% of $3 million is a heck of a lot more money than 3% of $30,000. And that's what people are doing when they're in sales, are constantly thinking, and they're doing everything they can to strategize. You want that big deal because you're going to get more money, even though you may have put in the same amount or less amount of time, right? That gives you flexibility. Absent the group that's trained in that, then what most people realize is I need special skills, so that I'm not in sales, right? So the only thing I can do is get my skills to a level that they're so well compensated that I'll be paid more per hour just because of the skills. And that's why I spend so much time in many of our programs talking about college and education and getting certified and a license and all this, because that's the easiest way to do this. But like I said, and we talk about it a lot in those programs, people get really frustrated and say, well, but I don't want to go learn how to, be an apprentice electrician. And I'm like, yeah, I hear you, but if you don't do anything differently, you'll be stuck your whole working career, and you'll just work, kind of add up more hours. You're never going to be able to dramatically get ahead. And by the time you get to retirement, because if you're working at low wage jobs, you're not getting these huge benefits for retirement, unless you live in a system where the formal society gives you more generous benefits. And in some parts of the world, there's that, but you still have to make decisions based on the reality. So much of of actually, it's really good advice. So there's so much I read about financial advice for retirement. And they'll talk about the allocation, your asset allocation. So what they're really asking you is how much of the money that you're investing for your retirement. We talked about, whether it's 2 decades or 4 decades or whatever out, how much of that are you putting into something that'll give you a higher rate of return, with more risk, though, potential risk of even a negative return, and how much of that are you putting in something that'll give you a lower rate of return, but it'll have less risk. And that's what most financial experts in these fields will spend a lot of their time chit-chatting about retirement, because that's really important, right? The deal is, though, but that presupposes you have any money. If you don't have any money, then none of that talk about, hey, how much of this are you going to put into that? What's your risk tolerance? Does it matter? No, it doesn't, because zero is zero. My risk tolerance could be really high. I could say, hey, I'm an aggressive investor. I'm aggressive as can be. I don't have any money, though. So my return on my investment is still going to be zero because I had zero invested. And that's the quandary that we're in when we're talking about, hey, what if I don't have any money for retirement? The first thing we talked about is there may be a formal system, and there may be informal systems, there may be both that'll be there for you if you do live long enough with no money saved, that you won't necessarily be literally just left to starve on the street. Assuming, which is the part of this show I really want you to understand and think about, the part of the show that you can control. Well, there's 2 parts: the income and then the outgo, right? So that the income is what I've just been going on about. And what I said, most people get into a trap of, they'll just think, well, I'll just work more hours. The problem, though, is you're going to burn out. And you're still not going to make that much money, because if you're being paid a low amount per hour, you're still being paid a low amount per hour. And you have a cap. You have an absolute finite cap on how many hours you can work, just because you're a human. Because you're going to have to sleep and go to the bathroom and stuff. And so that's not going to get you anywhere dramatically differently, so that you can have a whole bunch of money saved for retirement necessarily. Now, in the short term, if you do that combined with you're learning the skills you need so you can earn more per hour, or you can move to a sales commission type situation if you have those skills, then that's worth it. There is a movie, it just came to mind. So Hollywood movie, but I watched it and it was very touching. So Will Smith, international movie star now, and who started off as a rap artist when I was young, and he was young, but now international movie star. So Will Smith, really cute movie, right? And in the movie, Will Smith, he's having all these financial challenges, and he's struggling. He's like basically, living. In the U.S., they would call homeless, right? He doesn't have a place to live. Like, he's really down on his luck, and he goes and he starts working in one of these jobs where you're paid per deal, basically. You're paid commission deal type thing in the financial sector. And then everything turns around, and he has a child, and the movie's very touching. The pursuit of happiness, right? And it was cute, and it was wonderful and touching, and I teared up, and it was well done. Will Smith is, as I think often, just what a great career he's had, and so that though was an example of somebody who realized, look, if I get into this industry, right, then I'll be able to make money based on a percentage. I'll either get commission for the financial services I'm providing, and I'll be structured, bigger deal, bigger money, and all this kind of stuff. And now he moved into that. If you make, $10 an hour, and the U.S. Bare minimum is in the $7 range as the time of the show. For some jobs, it's much less than that, because the argument is that people get, allegedly they'll get tips to make up not making the $7 range. But if you make $10 an hour, I'm just using that as an example, which is very close to the lowest level you could possibly make. But even if you made that, you're only going to be able to work X number of hours. So even if you have 2 full-time jobs, right, you're still at $10 an hour, or in that range. But if you move from $10 an hour to $20 an hour, right, or you move from $10 an hour to $50 an hour, or you move from $10 an hour to $100 an hour, you went from $10 an hour to $100 an hour, and now we're really talking. Because you have far surpassed, well, you did that before. I mean, you did that before. Getting from 10 to 50, 10 to 40. How do you do that? I've been through the answers. You're going to have to go ahead and get the skills. So sales is always going to get you an opportunity, because they're so rare to find really great salespeople who also are ethical and really bright and innovative and all this. So if you're in sales, then that's one way. The other thing is, you're just gonna have to get skills that are worth that on the market. So you could get vocational skills. You could be an electrician, a plumber, but those, in most parts of the world, because they're trades, then it takes time. It takes time and education and either interns or apprenticeships to get licensed, to be a licensed electrician. But it's worth it. In my mind, it's worth it, because I can't get from $10 an hour to $50 an hour or $100 an hour just trying to add more hours. It's not possible. I'll never be able to work enough hours at $10 an hour to make what I'd make at $100 an hour. It's not going to happen. There's not enough time. But I can make a huge difference in my life if I can move my number that I make per hour up. Right? And we already said we're not a salesperson. So that was path 1. Path 2 is, what I need to do is raise my hourly rate. And I need to do that by acquiring some sort of rare, as per the marketplace, skills. And if I do that, now I'm going to make more money per hour. And so that's why we're discussing that. And so trades are always going to be an option, because you're always going to need that. You always are going to need a great electrician, or a great plumber. You're also going to need professional skills. So many of these, you go to university and you get a license. You're a professional engineer. And yes, people who are medical physicians, and I'm going to mention lawyers, they have much higher hourly pay, because there's such a long process, again, to get these skills. And then, of course, the societies say, hey, we need these skills, and this is what we pay for them. And so, is it worth it to spend a couple of years to get the skills to go from $10 to $50 an hour? Yes. In my estimation, it is. Now, it's not now, because we don't know how long we'll live. I remember when I was in high school and having these discussions with people, right? So I'm like 15, 16 years old, right? I understood totally how this worked then. And I was talking to people who disagreed with me, and they would say, hey, we don't know how long we're going to live, right? So you go to college and you spend all this time in school and everything. I could just go out and make money now. I could go make money now. And I'm like, yeah, you could. You're right. And you will be making more money now, because you'll be working more hours than I am while I'm going to school and trying to work. You're right. But I said, but the deal is 5 years out or 10 years out, I'm going to make a ton more money than you do, because I can make more per hour. And you're going to be at that same hourly rate. And their argument was, but who knows, we're going to make it 10 years. How do you know we'll be alive in 10 years? And they were right. And honestly, the truth is, some of us weren't. So you always can make the argument, and people do, I don't know what the future holds. I'm not going to do anything. Okay? And I can't disagree with that, because it's accurate to a point. I literally don't know. I don't know right now. Some people say they know. But if somebody knows, I don't want them to tell me, right? How much time I have left in this life as I know it, because it would change. It would not, I don't think it would make, I don't want to know. Let me just leave it at that. Even though I understand that all the hard work and everything that we do today could be for naught if this is our last day, all this stuff, all this anxiety, oh, what's going to happen in retirement? I haven't saved anything. And then, I die, today in 2 hours, and it doesn't matter because I never made it anywhere near retirement. I was I was decades away. I still had money locked up in accounts I couldn't even touch, right? So it wouldn't matter. But because I don't know what's going to happen, what if I do make it that far? It's there's gambling aspects to all of this, and that's why when financial experts talk about asset allocation, once you get the money, they start talking to you about how you need to look at what kind of risk you have. That's because they understand you could live a long time, and what if you lived a really, really, really long time, right? You need to have enough income producing assets and diversified assets and financial independence, maybe to make it, if people are living now, right, to 110, 115, 120. I've read some of the research that I don't know, because I don't know what I don't know. What if people are living to, what if some huge breakthroughs come along, and in our lifetimes, people start living to 150, 180. What if the years you have ahead of you are way more than you ever anticipated? Okay. Um, the only way you're going to have the money to be able to save for retirement is you're going to have to increase how much you make. The only way you're going to really be able to increase how much you make is you're going to have to go into things that are where you're based on a percentage of the deal. So whether that's bonus, commission, straight commission, doesn't matter. You're going to have to go into some sort of a sales or performance based payment. It's the only way it's going to change. And or you need to go get skills that are worth more. And this is the easiest thing. Just go to the library. And the library now, of course, is online. So just go to, a search engine and just look and see. How much do they pay this type of job? Oh, okay. Look, the thing I always say to, young students today is the same thing I said when I was in high school, right? But look, I could be the dumbest, stupidest neurosurgeon. I could be the worst neurosurgeon in history of all neurosurgeons. Not so bad that I am unable to do my job because, I harm people. So not that I'm totally incompetent, just that I'm like the worst performer. I was the worst in my class. The lowest paid neurosurgeon is going to make a ton of money compared to somebody who makes minimum wage. You don't even have to be good at it or brilliant. You just have to be competent. And that's why it's easier to go into something and say, look, if the average on this and the low average on this is, $200 an hour, then I'm going to go do that because if I like it, don't do it because only for the money, but pick something you like, right? But it's just logical. I don't even have to be great. I could be below average and I'll be making whatever, $75 an hour, where I could work the rest of my life at this minimum wage or close to minimum wage or low wage job. I could be brilliant. I could be the best they've ever seen, and I'm never going to make more than $12 an hour. Because the job's not worth more than that. And there's no extra compensation structure on top of that, like tips or performance-based or anything, profit sharing or any. If there's no other way, then you need to shift to how you look at money. And understand that working more hours is not going to get you there unless you have the other factor of you're going to get a percentage of something, or you're going to be paid bonuses, and or you need to get skills that they just pay that for that skill. It doesn't change who you are. It just means your skills are worth more, so they're going to give it to you. You don't have to be good. And it's a lot of the families and a lot of the, especially when we talk about people's immigration patterns around the world, that's what you see. You'll see a lot of people who the parent understands, look, I don't need that kid to even be they don't even forget the best. They don't even need to be average. I just need them not to fail out of the program. Because the lowest paid, accountant is going to do 10 times better than the best low wage staff member. And that's just the basics of the numbers. When you understand that, then the easy thing is just to go get those more highly compensated skills. And that's what we spend so many shows talking about. If you don't change anything in your system and you say, hey, what if I don't have any money saved for retirement? Well, what's the answer? Well, A, you're not alone. B, you may not make it to retirement. C, maybe you'll live somewhere or retire somewhere and be eligible for a formal system where there's some sort of program for people when they hit a certain age that would help you not be, destitute, and or informal programs. We talked about those earlier. The other thing is your debt. You've got to be debt free, or you need to be as close to it as you can. Because it's not, again, how much you make. Again, you can make $11,000 a week and be broke. You can make $11,000 an hour and be broke. You got to look at what are you spending money on? And that's a hard one. we did a show. I know we talked about the expert Susie Orman has this segment on her show, right? And it's like, can I afford it? And people ask, they talk about how much money they have, and how much money they've saved, and they talk about something they want to buy, and how much it costs, and how they're going to pay for it. And then Susie Orman will tell them, yes, you're approved, you can't afford it. Or she'll say, no, you cannot afford it. And she'll tell them why. And the thing is, you got to get breathing room to be able to even get there. So many people have no breathing room. There's just no margin for error. It's sort of like, I make $9 an hour. I'm going to work, this many hours this week. That'll give me this amount of money, and to the penny, everything is spent. Because just to pay rent, just to get the bus pass to get to and from work, took everything. And the only way that'll ever change is by doing what we just talked about. You have got to change the way you look at money. And you just don't go work more hours. What you have to do is change your skills so that you can get paid either based on the deal, bonus, sales type thing, or you just need to get skills that are worth more. And if you don't do that, your whole system is not going to, your entire approach to life isn't going to change dramatically enough for you to make enough money. Because at the low end of the wage scale, when you move up, you don't move up enough. You move up a little bit. So maybe you used to make $7.80 an hour, $7.80 an hour, and now you make $9 an hour. That's more, but it's not going to be enough to transform your life so that you're going to have the ability to go out there and start saving all this money for retirement. Because you don't have enough. You're not making enough. And the only way to make more is to do what we talked about. You're going to have to go out there and do something with that's sales related or performance related or deal based, and or you need to get skills that are just worth more. Now, some people will say, what if I marry somebody rich? Maybe, but I'm a lawyer. I've talked about in other programs all the things I learned from the time I've spent doing family law. That's not, if that was a viable, easy thing to do that was easier than like being a great sales professional and or getting skills and training and certification so that you could just earn more money an hour, I would say that, but it isn't. It really isn't. It's much harder because what you're basically saying is you want to find somebody else who did this, right? Somebody else who figured this out and they earned more an hour and they had a deal where they got a percentage and or owned their own revenue stream, right? Like they were their own conduit for business. Or they had some other relative who did that in the past and then they just inherited it. And then you're going to hope that they're just intrigued enough by you long enough and honest that they're going to give you some of their money. That's not really a system. Hoping that somebody else gives you money is not a system. It isn't. Going out and getting your own money is an easier system because you have control over that. You don't have control over somebody else. And people who get into those situations, and we did a show a while ago, right? Always have the ability to support yourself financially. And in that show, I talked about whether it's the marry a rich person thing or what I see more of actually that I've seen is adults who live off their, older adult parents or family money, and they don't ever create their own money, and it just hobbles people emotionally and I would argue even, psychologically. You got to have the ability to earn your own because it's just easier. Because I don't have to just wait on somebody else and try to, manipulate them or convince them. And when somebody believes that you're dependent on them financially, then you're in deep trouble. Because you're at the mercy of them, and you get a lot of people who do emotional abuse, and some people physically abuse people because they feel like they can. Because what can you do, right? And that's not who we are. So if you don't have any money saved for retirement, then good, you're not alone. Look through some of the data in your part of the world that you feel applies to you, and then be honest with yourself. Why don't you? If you already do make enough money and you really are spending it all on just silliness, then you got to sit down and stop doing that because you're self-sabotaging. And the weird thing about these things is you really don't know. And, it's always that person who's like, I never thought I'd make it this long, who makes it to 95 or whatever. So just in case you are alive, that's why you have diversification. That's what we talked about. That's why you're going to do everything in your power to understand I can't just spend everything I have because I don't care how much money I had, I'm going to be broke. Because I'm spending it all. And no, you cannot afford it. And that's that path. If you are working but you just can't earn enough, then you got to figure out why you can't earn enough. I know the answer because you're just not charging enough. The reason you're not charging enough is because nobody will pay it. The money I make doing the jobs I do now, even though I'm literally the exact same person, is different from the money I made when I worked a minimum wage job at a factory or a minimum wage less than minimum wage job, I worked as a waitress. It's not that I've changed. I'm still literally, sadly, in so many ways, I'm the same height, right? I haven't grown since like, I don't think I've grown any in terms of height since like I was, 14 or 13 years old. I'm the same size and the same person. I just have different skills that I'm using. That's why I can charge more, whether through an employer or a contract or just on my own direct to the market. But it's the same skills. If I was only using my waitressing skills or my food service skills or the other minimum wage job skills I have, which I used, if I still only used those, I'd still make the same amount of money. And the other thing is we got to watch what you're wasting money on because, you want to have money so you can use it. But on the other side, like I said earlier, I mentioned the other problem that I get in my mind is I feel like I hoard and I have, quote, too much, meaning, come on. And there are people who do that, which is something we talk about in especially our satisfaction saturation and our self-employment ecstasy series, right? Like you need to enjoy your life now and not just keep hoarding money, unrealistically. Like you need to spend some of it so you have a good quality of life. And sometimes emotionally we have unhealthy relationships with resources, and that happens to me sometimes. I have all these fears in my mind sometimes where I'll think, oh my goodness, I have to work more and save more and all this kind of stuff, because something bad happens. But the thing is, at a certain point, I have to force myself to put it on paper and say, you have a plan. Like you have a plan and a backup plan, right? A backup plan if something happens to the houses I live in, then I rent houses always because I feel like, okay, something happens, I can move to those little houses because they're cheaper, right? But at some point, it's like, I literally have to force myself and say, look, you have plan, you got backup plans, you got all kind of plans. Now, at some point, start relaxing and enjoying life and go, have a nice dinner at that place or take yourself on that nice trip or whatever. That's a whole nother type of thing. But if you don't have any money saved for retirement and you don't change anything, then you're not going to have any money saved for retirement. I mean, that's the truth. And I'm not going to sit here and play games about, oh, well, you need to really look at your asset allocation and you need to save 20% of your income. Look, if you could do that, I know you'd be doing it. And that's sort of the stress of these things. The advice only helps you when you have the resources. If you have the resources, then that's great. But most people don't have them. That's why they haven't saved anything. You're not going to be able to save anything unless you can dramatically increase how much money you make while not increasing your debt. Most people who don't make enough money, right, to save for retirement aren't spending, lavishly on extravagant stuff. Most people aren't. The challenge is that they need, as they make more money, once they decide, where their option is, whether it's these, this sort of sales based skill set or these certification trades and specialized skills, whatever they do, the key then is to not increase your debt. So what happens is somebody's, when you go from making, $1,500 a month to, $5,500 a month, you're in great shape if you don't raise your standard of living too high. What'll happen is somebody will say, oh, I make more money, now I'll just go spend more. So they're just as broke as they were before because they went and they doubled how much they spent on housing and they tripled how much they spent on a vehicle and all this. And then they went out thinking, oh, well, I make more money, I deserve all this other stuff. And that's how everybody will go broke. I don't care if you're a billionaire. If you go out and you just look around and think, well, all of this is, awesome, and or people will think I'm awesome if I have it, you're not going to have any money. You've got to keep the costs low, and then you bank the difference. So when you move from $1,500 to $5,500 a month, you should be in really good shape. Now you can, maybe move up a little bit to maybe. Sometimes people, especially for especially people who have kids or grandkids, you want to get to a place where your kids can go to the best schools. And many parts of the world, the schools are based on where where you live. So sometimes people say, "Hey, I'm going to move to a new neighborhood. Maybe my housing cost is going to go up $400 a month, but it's worth it because my family will be in a better school district." And I went from 1,500 to 5,500, so I can absorb the 400. That's rational, especially if you tie that to longer term real estate investments. But you got to watch all the rest of the spending. I say to myself all the time. I was at the store in the last day or so, and I stuff costs so much, and money's all relative, but I know from data that I make, relatively speaking, there's a tiny minuscule percentage of women who are just one person income. That's the numbers I make. I know that just because I we do shows on and on the on this financial stuff, and I research and I know this, and I'm constantly shocked at how much stuff costs. And I see other people and they have often much lower incomes, and they're buying stuff, and I wonder, how do you afford this? It's expensive, I think, right? So, I mean, you have to always keep that in your mind. And it's all about the tricky balance is getting to that financial independence and then sustaining it, right? And still not getting to that, crossing over to that mindset where you kind of become a hoarder. You got to be, it's that healthy balance. And I struggle with that, which is why I just mentioned some of the other show series. But in this show, if you don't have any money saved for retirement and nothing's going to change, then that's just the reality. And then you need to really make sure you understand whatever your mandatory benefit is, where you are, and any informal benefit. So if you're in the States, you need to go to the Social Security website, or an office, I guess, but probably the website's easier. And they'll also, the Social Security Administration mails. I don't know if they still, yeah, they do, because I got one recently. If you're eligible and you're in the system, they mail it to you, and you can go online, and they'll show you how much money you would make in retirement based on what you've already paid into the system. They'll tell you how much money you'll make in retirement, assuming you keep working for X number of years more, whatever the rate is that you currently make, and they'll tell it to you. I saw my number, right? So you need to go do that and look and see, and that's something. That's a base. But if you're a little bit out from retirement, and the numbers we shared earlier, we said for women, the median Social Security for women in the U.S. is $11,999 a year. Then you need to ask yourself, how am I going to get to a point where I can make it on? It's right around, it's less than $1,000 a month. But if you don't have any debt, then you could be in good shape. So that would be, if you know that you say to yourself, hey, there's no way I'm going to be able to go and get some more skills, for whatever reason. I don't want to hear anything about, I can't, I don't have the time, I'm too old. Don't give me that, because we do a whole bunch of shows on that. If you really wanted it, then I'll work with you, and we will find a program. We'll find a way to either have some funding for it, or make it happen. But if you, for whatever reason, you're like, I'm not going to do that, or it's not possible, it's not feasible, then you need to look and see what your benefits would be, or what your benefits currently are, and then you need to start planning around that. So don't do some fantasy thing. Oh, well, I know my benefit is going to be, $940 a month, but, maybe something will happen. Well, yeah, okay. It might. You might win the lottery. But if you don't, you need to figure out how on $940 a month you're going to be able to be in good shape. And the only way it's going to happen is you gotta not have bills. Like, you gotta cut bill. No, no. So that you can get to a point so that on your $940 a month, you'll be, oh, this is good. I got to eat maybe, a little bit. I can spend time with my friends or doing stuff I like because I got $940. If that money, absent, I'm trying to think, depending on where you are, but you might be able to make it on just like $300 a month on utilities and mandatory payments. That would be okay. That would be okay. But $940 a month with bills, you're paying a mortgage, you're trying to pay car notes, you're trying to pay credit card debt. It's not happening because you're going to be, your numbers aren't going to work. And then some people say, well, I'll just work forever. Okay. And some people do. I mentioned earlier in the show, performers like, Joan Rivers or Tony Bennett, they're working in their 80s. Okay. On the other hand, they have really specific skills. So if you don't have really specific skills where, it's a passion for you, and or you have some sort of physical limitation as you age, then that's really not a plan. Working because you love it and you're in your 80s or 90s is awesome, right? I think think of people like, Bob Hope, or the actor and a comedian. A lot of people work until their 80s and 90s because they love it. It's their thing. It makes them happy. Usually those are people who are pretty financially well off. Most of the people that we see in society that are working and they're older, it's not because they love it, especially if it's a low wage job, a difficult job. It's because they need the money. I hope that I can work and do the work I enjoy until my time is up. If I lived to 115, I'd be doing episode, goodness knows what it would be, but I'd love to be doing what I do because I do this stuff because it's fun. But I work because I enjoy it. I don't work because I feel like, quote, I have to. I do this stuff because I like it. It makes me happy. But I wouldn't want to be with no skills that are worth more than minimum wage, having to work because if I don't work, I'm not going to be able to eat. And the only way I'm going to do that is I need to be in a part of the world where there's some sort of system I can hope to rely on. And if not, I need to change my income situation while keeping my debts low. That's the only thing that'll potentially change. But you have to make dramatic changes in your life to change your income, right? And to make dramatic changes in your mind where you really see in your mind like, well, yeah, I'm totally worth that. And you have to develop these skills, whether they're the sales commission type skills, or you go and you learn a trade or get a professional degree or certification or license. And that's all I know. That's the easiest way to do this. Because again, you can be like literally the stupidest person in your class at a high wage profession, and it doesn't matter. You're still going to get the higher wage, even if it's the lowest of the high wage. It's going to be way more than you would have made if you were the best at the low wage job. So just go pick one of those things that you like. There's enough variety in the world. I guarantee you'll find something that you're like, yeah, I really like this. Perfect. That's high wage. Do that. Now, when you make more money, take as much of that money as you can and save it until you get to your financial independence. Then when you get to financial independence, you're going to focus on sustaining that, and you're also going to start to focus on these other things where you don't start to hoard and get unhealthy with money. You don't control other people with money, right? A lot of people get into that. You don't use money as a proxy for your own self-image. But if you don't have money saved for retirement and you don't change anything, then you're probably not going to have money saved for retirement. Then you need to look and see what your benefits would be from any formal or informal program, and you need to build your lower backward around that and say, hey, if it's going to be $940 a month, I need to pay off every debt. And then anybody who asks you, okay, will you give them this or co-sign for that or borrow money for them for this, the answer has to be no, because you got to get to a point where you have enough that you can feed yourself and have a decent quality of life. And if you're going to be the one that's 75 years old, especially for people who are younger than you are, like, they're going to have to step up and take care of themselves, and you see that. You see the whole thing where adults, and especially older adults, are still trying to support, a 30 or a 40-year-old child. And that's not healthy for anybody, right? So, as always in our programs here in episode 226, I try to be as optimistic as I can while being a pragmatist. If you don't have any money saved for retirement, then you don't have any money saved for retirement. You're not alone, okay, which is good. We don't know how long we're going to live. That's true. But now let's look at the two parts of it. What am I going to do for my income, if anything? And if I'm not going to do anything for my income, I need to research and find out what whatever benefits might be. And then I need to just be as fierce and aggressive as I can in getting rid of every single possible debt that I have. And then if I get to a point where there's an age or some other income qualifying program where I can get lower utilities or lower payments on something that I have to have, like property taxes, then you need to go ahead and apply for that as soon as you can. And then you need to just hoard whatever little money there is coming in so that you've got a little bit extra. And that just in case you and I both live to be 150, which certainly who knows what this science and talented people in our world are working on, that you'll be, okay. And that's a good thing. Then, of course, we got to work on our health and make sure that mentally and physically that we're in, good shape so we can enjoy our life. But don't delude yourself. I don't care how old you are right now. If you haven't done anything, you don't change the income situation, you don't aggressively get rid of the debt, then nothing, it's amazing how the years go by. I look sometimes and I think, how on earth am I the age that supposedly I am? Well, I'm happy to be this age, but it's, the years they just go by so quickly. And if you don't make those dramatic changes for your income stream, and if you don't have anything saved now, you're probably not going to have anything saved in the future. And I'm not going to sit here and play games about, well, if you just change your asset allocation. The truth is you don't have any assets to allocate anywhere. So we're not going to waste time on that kind of stuff. If you have the energy, if you have the drive and the motivation, then you need to go explore the two main areas to maximize your income. And then you need to keep your debt low, and you need to move to financial investments and things that you hold. right? You don't need to go out and get a new TV. You already have a TV. It works good enough. And then you need to plan just in case you do live that long. But there's no magic. And that's why the numbers, I said earlier, right, in the U.S., 36% of workers have less than $1,000 in savings. Okay. And the majority of people, it's because the majority of people who work paycheck to paycheck to have the quote extra $1,000, like just literally like $1,000 just laying around somewhere, like, hey, an extra $1,000. For most people, that's like a delusion. Are you serious? There's not even an extra $100. There's not extra anything because it's all spent. And not people wasting it. It's just spent on just the bare basics. You know, a place to live. And if you have a family, then your costs, of course, are going to be much higher. And everything costs so much. And the society moves so quickly. This is my last point for this show because there's so much on my mind. But I'm going to mention this. To apply for a job now, right? Even a minimum wage job. This amazes me. Most of these organizations say, especially in the States, you got to go on the internet website, apply online. Now, to apply online, you got to have you got to have hardware to allow you to get online, and you have to have software. You have to have an internet provider. All of this costs a ton of money. But the assumption is, hey, you want to apply for this job that makes literally minimum wage, the lowest amount of money we could pay you without being, in violation of the law. You have to go get a hardware, go get a software so that you can create and write and type up a document that you can save in a software compatible with our system. You need to be able to have enough access that you can then go to our website and complete all of our online application. I mean, that's a ton of money, but that's the assumption. And that's the reason why people don't have any money saved for retirement. It costs so much. So what we're going to do, aware of all of this, is be strategic, right? You work smarter, not harder. That's the whole thing I rambled. I didn't ramble, but it's the whole thing that I shared about earlier. You got to work smarter. Work smarter means you got to make more per unit of time, not just keep working more hours because you're never going to get ahead. There's just not, because you're up against the physical limits of our bodies, and we got to sleep, we got to eat, we have to have hygiene time. So you got to be strategic, and you got to just go figure out, and this is easy because it's online or your library, and just look and see, and ask yourself, even if this isn't something I'm probably going to be the best in the world, even if you're the dumbest neuroscientist, you're going to be making a ton of money relative to minimum wage, and just keep understanding how these things work. But not having anything saved is not having anything saved. It doesn't mean we can't have a plan. It just means we need to be honest. So if the only plan we have is, hey, and if retirement's really close, really close, then the only plan is I need to look at my mandatory benefit and see what it is, confirm it, and then start planning backwards from that. Having garage sales, paying off any kind of debt I have, and getting to a point where it's just bare minimums, and then I can save or at least have available whatever extra money is there for my mandatory benefit. Okay? All right. I really appreciate you being part of the program today. As always, I do ask people to visit CourtneyAnderson.com. I also ask you to leave a rating or review when you find our show on iTunes or Stitcher or Libsyn or iHeartRadio or any of our partners around the world. And I ask that you let me know if you have any show ideas. And I am on Twitter @ZealousBusiness. So thank you again for being part of the show today.